Welcome to another episode of Sheepdog Nation podcast with your host, me, Autumn Schmidt. This episode is brought to you by the Sheepdog Nation family. This is where police officers come into a group, be mentored by Autumn to grow, to up level, to transform their lives, to get the position that you've wanted, to find balance in your life, to find balance in your marriage, and to move forward in your career being a serious, badass cop who's got it together. If you are interested in this, hit the link down below in the show notes and you can learn all about how you can join us. In today's episode, I'm super excited to have you here, Sheepdog Nation. I interview a police officer from the Douglas County Sheriff's Office in Colorado. His name is Dan Brite. He was hit with an AK-47 round, and he actually was paralyzed. He is paralyzed from the waist down. And you know what? That did not stop him. And I cannot wait for you to hear and meet this man who is so resilient and tenacious, and he just is not stopping. Enjoy. Dan, I'm really excited to have you here. Can you please introduce yourself to Sheepdog Nation?
Yeah, my name is Dan Brite, and I'm a detective with the Douglas County Sheriff's Office in Colorado.
In Colorado, eh?
Yeah.
How do you like that?
I love it. It's I don't love the winter so much, but Colorado's beautiful year-round regardless, so it's a lot of fun, a lot of things to do here.
Hey, do you happen to know a buddy of mine? His name is Patrick Fitzgibbons. He runs the CJ Evolution podcast.
I do not.
Because he just retired from Colorado.
Oh.
Yeah, he's a cop. He was a watch commander down there. But anyways, so you're a detective, so you're off the road.
Yes.
So are you like Danny Reagan in Blue Bloods?
No, not quite.
That's the only cop show I like, I'll be honest with you. That one and well, I like SEAL Team, but so I like to give my friends shit when they're detectives.
Yeah, I don't know if I have a cop show. I don't watch
Good
cops or any of the other shows or
good.
I don't
Smart.
know.
Smart.
It's hard to watch them sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. You're smart. So tell me about you. Like why does Sheepdog Nation want to hear from you?
Well, I've been in law enforcement for 18 years, so I'm very familiar with the culture and the things that we experience, the traumatic events, and I'm also very, very familiar with how we often deal with those traumatic events. And before September 2nd of 2016, I was your typical cop that I kept my emotions in. I dealt with them on my own. I didn't share them with anybody. And my coping mechanism back then was I would go running, I would go jogging, and that would help me keep those emotions to a low simmer. And that's how I dealt with this profession for the longest time. But then September 2nd, 2016, as a plainclothes detective, we responded to a suicidal man that was near a hospital, a retirement home, a middle school, and elementary school, all within just a couple hundred yards of his house. And he was loading up his RV full of weapons. He had several ammo cans, AK-47, a shotgun, a handgun. He had just about everything you can think of inside the RV. And when we showed up on scene to isolate him, because he was trying to leave and threatening to have the shootout with the police, we were trying to keep him contained so he couldn't have access to the schools and the hospital. And as soon as I showed up on scene with my team, we immediately got into a gunfight with him, and his AK-47 round hit me about 4 inches below the left armpit, that one small area that's not covered by a bulletproof vest.
Wow.
And of course, luck is on his side, and he got me right there. And the rounds went in, destroyed my spleen, took out half of my left lung, and went through my diaphragm and my stomach. And then when I had fallen down, I continued firing until I went unconscious. And that's when we have SWAT medics on our team, and that's when the SWAT medic and my partner scooped me up and took me to the hospital. And so when I got to the hospital, I was dead. There was no heartbeat.
No shit.
The amazing surgeon there cracked open my chest, and with his bare hands, he massaged my heart back to life. I didn't even know that was an actual procedure, but
No.
it's called an emergency thoracotomy, where it's essentially the last ditch effort to try and save somebody's life from a trauma wound. And he would massage with his hands, massage my heart, and it started beating on its own again. And then about 20 minutes later, the heart stopped beating a second time. So they went back to massaging the heart, and he finally got it to beat a second time, thank God. So I died twice, and thankfully the right surgeon was there. He knew exactly what to do, and he had saved my life. Unfortunately, because of all the damage, I'm paralyzed from the belly button down. But I will tell you that the physical injuries from that shooting, I would deal with 100 times more than the mental struggle. Because like I said earlier, running was my coping mechanism. Well, now that I couldn't run, I had a really hard time adapting to life in a wheelchair and to what my new identity was going to be, to the point that I was severely depressed. I was pushing my family away. I started having suicidal thoughts. I was going downhill quickly. And it took my stubborn family and friends to surround me and to let me know that that they weren't going to let me travel down that road. They helped me realize that the road that I was traveling, that was not the way I wanted to go. And they actually encouraged me to go see a therapist. And I will tell you, when I was in the wheelchair, I still had hopes of being a cop, even though I knew that there's no way that they're going to let me still be a cop, because I can't do the essential functions, right? But then I was even more worried that once they found out that I had suicidal thoughts, that, oh, they're definitely going to fire me now. Like, there's no way I'm going to be able to keep my job. And, and that is a constant theme in the law enforcement world is, we're two reasons we don't reach out for help is one is we think it's a sign of weakness, and two, we're in fear of losing our job, and a lot of us have put it in blood and sweat to get to the point where we are now. We don't want to lose it. Yeah. So we kind of protect that as best as we can. But I'll tell you that that's absolutely the best thing that I ever could have done was when to go see a therapist and to get that help to help me recover from the PTSI from the shooting. And now, having traveled that road, I'm now a huge advocate for mental health for first responders. And I am extremely grateful that the sheriff at Douglas County has found a way for me to keep my badge and my gun, even from a wheelchair. So
what a leader, huh?
Yeah, that alone absolutely made a huge difference in my recovery. Because I don't want to lose my identity. I didn't want to lose everything that I know. You know what I mean? Yeah, and worked for. And so to be able to keep that was huge for me. And so now, my whole focus is on let's take care of all the officers that do go out on the road and handle all the nasty stuff. Since I can't be there with them out in the field handling or helping them, I can at least be behind the scenes helping them with the mental health aspect of it. And it's been excellent, an amazing journey, because I would have never shared my feelings before this, No. There's no way. I would have just said, oh, I'm good. I don't need any help,
But okay, so first off, thank you so much for, number one, being on here. Number two, sharing this with us. And number three, for fighting to to be better and to survive multiple times in your life, not just, your heart stopping twice, but I mean afterwards. Like, thank you for just never giving up, because
Yeah, thank you.
yeah, I mean, that's so powerful. But I have like 1,000 questions. So the
Yeah,
first
absolutely.
the first question I have to ask you is, so like, do you remember what it was like when you died?
So my mind has this amazing feature where it'll it blocked out, or there's no memory of the actual shooting. Um,
Wow.
we've done some EMDR, and the closest I can get to being in the shooting, remembering,
Mm-hmm.
is when I was kneeling down in front of the left front tire of my unmarked truck, and the tires had just been replaced, so I had that new tire smell,
Mm-hmm.
and so that smell will actually bring up a lot of emotions with me.
Mm.
But that is the last memory I have, is me kneeling down in front of that tire, engaging in a gunfight with the suspect.
And
And
so
that,
you don't remember what it was like to die then? Like,
no,
because like people say that, like, oh, I saw this bright light, or I saw God, or blah blah blah. You don't have that?
no, no, nothing. There's no memory of being shot and me going down and returning fire, and none of that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And so like okay, so like how's your people that were with you, like your team, how are they doing, or how?
Well, we're still very close. Um, I keep in contact with them because there are still some that haven't gone to see a therapist to deal with
Mm-hmm.
that trauma, and that's okay. You don't have to go see a therapist every time. You just need to learn how to have healthy coping mechanisms. Not turn to alcohol or gambling or any other kind of risky behavior, but just to have that healthy way of venting and to releasing those emotions. And so we keep in contact with each other a lot to make sure we're all doing okay. Because just like me, they all have good days and bad days too.
Mm.
Even
Yeah,
though they're perfectly fine. It's those invisible injuries that can tear you up if you don't address them.
absolutely. Now, okay, so do you have what would you give, Sheepdog Nation for advice? Like, was there any advice? Was there anything that you would do differently? Like, you are responding to this call of a suicidal male, one of the most dangerous, calls that law enforcement officers go to aside from a DV, right? And
Hmm.
so, do you have any advice? Like, what would you say to an officer?
Well, I think now it seems like the approach to suicidal subjects is starting to change. Or before it was, let's um, run in and get them, save their lives. But now it's, if they're armed, what is the real point of us going in, risking our own lives,
Agreed.
right? To try to save them. Like we can still try, but let's not rush in, right? And then start a confrontation, and then we end up getting hurt. So it's just finding alternatives to dealing with the situation.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that be standing off and trying to communicate and doing other approaches other than let's just run in and grab this guy.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's great advice. And I have definitely seen more of a shift. Like when I first started, it was like, all right, we're going in. We're gonna go in,
Right.
we're gonna whatever we do, well, we're gonna get this person, because if they're armed, then they're gonna hurt themselves. And it was like not even a thought that they might friggin' like, it was a thought, but it was like a distant thought. But
Hmm.
now you're right. Now it's like, okay, so if they're inside by themselves, okay, they have a gun, but it's not illegal to
Right.
have a freaking gun. They're in their home. There's
Yeah.
nobody else in there. Okay. So if they,
And that's why in my incident, because he was still in an RV when we showed up on his property, our whole goal was just to prevent him from getting inside the house.
mm,
And it just so happens, because I was the first on scene, I positioned myself in between the RV and the house, because we didn't know what other weapons he had in the house or if there was anybody else in the house. We were just going to isolate him to the RV and
mm,
then work on different approaches. But as soon as I put myself in between him and the house, he started firing at us. So that situation wasn't so much as we were rushing in to get him. We were just trying to contain him to a very small area, so then we can try and deploy other tactics.
And it's crazy how fast shit can go bad, right?
Yes, very fast.
Yeah, very fast. And a lot of times, like I know, in my mind, I'm like, all right, well, if this happens, I'm going to do this, right? And if this happens, I'm going to do this. Like what we're taught in the academy, but probably in your situation, you didn't even, it's like, okay, I'm going to do this because like you said, I'm going to contain this person. The next thing you know, all fucking hell breaks loose and you just don't even, yeah.
Yep. And then you just, you respond according to how you've been trained, and it just kicks in without second thought. And before you know it, I woke up in the hospital 10 days later.
Really? 10 days later, huh?
Yeah.
Crazy. And so, okay, so let me ask you this, like okay, so just to bring it back for a moment. So you said, Autumn, I used to, how I coped prior to, this incident, I would spend, what'd you say? Did you say you spent 18 years on the job running? Or 16?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. That was my coping mechanism, to get that euphoric feeling after you run, that natural high. That really helped me clear my head, helped me control my emotions when the internal and external stresses of the job would start to rear their ugly head. And it worked for me. Like it was successful at it. It worked really well for me. But then once my legs were taken away, right, I'm paralyzed. I can't do that anymore. I can't even reach that level, that euphoric level anymore. So now I had to find completely different ways to cope, and I wasn't ready or prepared to learn different coping mechanisms because my mind was so stuck on the situation and how much it has taken away from me. I'm not able to hold my wife's hand when we go for a walk. I can't take my daughters to the daddy-daughter dance on Valentine's Day and dance like we used to. I can't play basketball with them like we used to. Like there's just so many things that it stripped away from me that it was really starting to eat me up inside and was pushing me further down that hole of depression.
And yeah. So, okay. So I just want to ask you this. I want to bring it back for just a second. So that was how you coped, right? You ran. Now, let me ask you this. Because you didn't, like you said, you would run, you'd get, that high and that's how you dealt with it. But because you didn't really talk about things, would you say that affected your relationship or your life back then though?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So my wife she's a patrol sergeant.
Wow, she gets it then.
So she gets it. But I will tell you, the difference between then and now, like back then, not sharing my feelings or my emotions, that definitely had an effect on our relationship. I mean, we still loved each other, but it wasn't as deep of a connection as it is now. Because now I've had to learn a different way to communicate, a different way to love my family. And we are now on a whole new level because of this incident, because we have stuck by each other and supported each other. And so we have to find new ways of communicating. And that's why now, that running was helping me cope. But at some point,
but you
the
weren't
running is
dealing
not
with
going to
it.
help anymore. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It was more of a suppression technique, which had worked so well, but there was going to become a point where you eventually boil over, and I was under the impression that, well, if I just keep running, I can keep that at a low summer. But obviously that's not the case, because when I got shot, that's when it boiled over, and it was a bad mental place to be in.
And so do you think that therapy is what pulled you out of it?
I think it was a combination of things. It was definitely therapy, and trying to learn how to process the trauma, how to learn to live life in a wheelchair, how to accept that. But then also, it was faith. I was never a strong believer before this, but then once this happened and I realized all these little things that happened during the shooting, and there's no other explanation than and that God had to intervene. Like I can just give you a few examples. After I got shot and I fell down, the suspect was still shooting at me, and around my body you could see these little marks in the ground, and they found out that that's the AK-47 rounds that were skipping off the ground as he was trying to hit me, but he didn't. He only hit me once. Had he put another hole in me while I was down, I wouldn't be here, Yeah. And then the fact that the right surgeon who had that experience in emergency thoracotomy saved my life, because the suspect was so close to the hospital. When he was just randomly shooting, one of those rounds went through the 4th story window of the hospital.
No kidding.
And that window just happened to belong to the on-call surgeon that saved my life. Because he heard the sirens, he had went down to the ER to see what was going on. After he left, that round went through his window, through his computer screen, and through like 3 more walls before it stopped.
No shit.
So there is no other explanation for that, Like if he would have just stayed up in his office doing his thing and not, I've heard the sirens and went down just prior. Like if he would have been shot, there's no way I would have been here, because he was the only one that knew how to do that kind of procedure at the hospital. So there's just a lot of nuances in the shooting that I'm like, there can be no other explanation than God intervened.
Absolutely.
In the round, AK-47 round travels at 2,400 feet per second, roughly. And when it hit my side, that bullet had no contact with any other part of the environment. It didn't hit part of the vest or the rifle or anything. It just went straight from the AK-47 muzzle to my side with no interruption. So why didn't that round continue to travel straight to my heart?
Yeah.
Instead, it hit my spleen and took a sudden turn south towards the stomach, which that doesn't make sense to me, because if it's only hitting soft body tissue, you would think the bullet would travel straight for a little bit, but it didn't. And I cannot explain that.
Wow, that's fascinating. And so,
yeah.
Okay, so this all leads us into what you're doing now. Will you tell Sheepdog Nation like what you're doing now?
Yeah, so now the Douglas County Sheriff's Office has fully invested into the wellness of their employees and families. So we have created a peer support and wellness unit, in which I am now in charge of, and we're trying to get it up and running to focus on the mental health for our employees. But then also, aside from that, we are approaching legislation, both at the federal and state level, to try and do a few things for mental health. One is to make law or first responder suicides mandatory reporting with some confidentiality, right? We don't want pictures and names given out of respect for the families, but we want to capture key data, how long have they been on the job? What unit were they in? Certain things that can help us better understand why we're doing this.
Yeah.
And maybe do a little bit of an autopsy of their career to kind of see maybe where the turning point was, so we can help combat this problem. Because I'll tell you now, especially for law enforcement, the line of duty deaths is much less than the suicides that happen every year.
I know.
And that's only data from voluntary information. So agencies that want to give that information up, or families that want to provide that info, that's only data from that kind of community. It's not mandatory, So I think once you make it mandatory, it's going to throw out a big number that's really going to wake people up and be like, this is huge. Like, this is a big problem, and we need to address it. And the sad thing is, there's only 10% of agencies across the U.S. have any kind of suicide prevention program. Yet it's our number one killer. So that doesn't make sense. So we want to bring awareness to that through the mandatory reporting, then also to provide job protections for first responders that reach out, right, to help destroy that stigma that I'm going to lose my job if I reach out for help. Well, let's make sure you don't lose that job, and let's give you job protections. It's not your fault that you have to go to all these calls that cause trauma, death, serious injury. The job is responsible for causing those kind of emotions and experiences. So we should be responsible for helping you take care of it and helping you keep your job while you get help. So it's just another approach to letting the first responder community know that it's okay to reach out for help and you are protected.
It's so powerful. It's what you're saying is so powerful. So what was that video that I found? Do you remember?
Yes, I do. It's called, it's called Starting the Conversation. So we teamed up with Dr. Metz, who's a police psychologist or public safety psychologist out here in Colorado with Code 4 counseling. And our goal was, we wanted to lead by example and show people that, it is okay to talk about these things that you experience. There should be no shame in reaching out for help, and that your mental health is just as important as your physical health. So with the video, what we did is we're going to actually shoot some more, but with this first one, we did cops and firefighters and then their spouses and adult children. And we interviewed them to kind of understand, what their emotions were like, what they went through, and to let people know, in the first responder community that they're not alone. And we wanted to present that, especially here in Colorado, to make it part of a academy training, mandatory academy training, and mandatory in-service training. So every year, first responders would have to watch this video and learn that it's okay to reach out for help. It's okay to have these feelings, that there's hundreds of others that share the same exact experience as you do. And that the only way that you're going to get healthier mentally is by starting that conversation. And that has to be with either a trusted one or with a therapist, but it has to, at some point, it has to happen. Because if we continue to keep it in, that's what's killing us.
Okay, so that was my next question is that what in your opinion, because you've obviously been, very low, as you stated, earlier, what would you think the number one, why do we have such a problem with police suicide? Why is the rate so high?
I think the rate's so high. Well, there's a couple reasons. One is we are so used to helping everybody else that when we have our own problems, we feel like we can take care of them on our own. But then the other part of that also is the internal stressors from having the depression and the mental health issues. Like I'm afraid that I am going to get fired, or I'm going to get transferred or demoted, or I'm going to lose everything that I've worked so hard for because they're going to think I'm mentally unstable, which that is the furthest from the truth. The goal here is to get help early and often so it doesn't end up to where you're relying on alcohol or risky behaviors to cope, So I think, and it all starts from the command staff, from the very top, that has to be sold that mental health, we're investing in mental health for our employees, and we're going to make sure that you're taken care of, not only physically, but mentally as well. And then you don't feel like you have that kind of support, I think really shuts down those officers that need to reach out for help.
Absolutely. And so what do you think? So tell me about the solution that you've created. Can you tell me about the group? Do you guys get together? Is it like?
Yeah. So it's just essentially what we did is we just sent out a message to Colorado first responders and said, hey, is there anybody willing to talk about their experiences? So we want to record that and display that, if it reaches across the nation, then so be it. But we want it to be seen by as many first responders as possible, as this is what getting help looks like. This is the pain that we all suffer from and this is how we can recover from that pain. Our next video is going to be on substance abuse. So having, firefighters, cops, spouses, kind of like the same thing, that focuses just on substance abuse as a unhealthy coping mechanism. And I'll tell you, when we put that message out there, I was overwhelmed with the response of first responders and their families that wanted to be a part of it. And it was actually amazing to see that there are so many people willing to speak up about it. So I think we've come at a time in this profession where, we're past due the time where mental health should be one of the things that we really focus on.
Yep. I couldn't agree more. It's a big, to be honest with you, that was why I started this podcast, because, a year and a couple of months ago, I was just venting. I got injured on duty, and I can tell you that I didn't have near the experience that you did, but I can just say that being injured on duty and not being able to be a cop and not be able to do my job. I didn't work for an agency that was as nice as yours, I can tell you that. But just not being able to do it even full time. I still do it part time, but anyways, it changes you, and it changes your mentality, and it hits you at such a core. And for me, I went through this experience where I lost a lot of, my own partner just fucking went away. Like this guy who, I worked with him for 4 or 5 years, and we hung out all the time together off duty. Our spouses knew each other. Like we all 4 hung out all the time. And then I got injured, and like my partner just like literally disowned me. And like that was so heartbreaking. Right. And that's part of the mind fuck you're talking about, as far as it takes you at such a deep level. And I think, I think police officers, like you said, we work so hard to get where we're at. You don't want to give that up. And when you go through situations where, and I have to say this, is that even the cops that haven't lost their job, right? But the cops that are going through terrible times where they just feel completely outcasted from everybody in the police department. Wouldn't you agree? Even that hits hard.
Right. Yeah, and that's the exact opposite of what we should be doing. We should be opening up our arms and taking in our brothers and sisters and being there for them, and then helping them get through it. It's hard enough to find good cops.
Yep.
Our applicant pool is dwindling. So why are we not taking care of the ones that are already doing the job and helping them get better? It helps the office all around, because you now have a healthier employee that's making better decisions out there, because their mind is now not consumed with all the trauma they dealt with. They've learned how to process it and learned how to live a healthier life. So why not invest in those employees and try to keep them around as long as we can?
Powerful. And that's true. And that's where I'm at too. I don't know why people aren't. I don't know why more agencies aren't. All I can think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but my opinion from my experience and based on the officers that I've spoken with around the country, what seems to be the answer is that we just have a lot of old school administrations that they're just far removed. Like for some, maybe, I don't know. That's just kind of what I think. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. It's that archaic approach to, suck it up, buttercup. Let's just go deal with it by drinking alcohol, or, you deal with it on your own time. And listen, I get that when we're on the job, yes, we do have to suck it up, right? We have to keep that level of professionalism, maintain scene control. I get it that we cannot be emotional while on the job, but we need to learn emotional intelligence and learn when to turn that off. When you're in a safe environment and it's all right to release, to talk about it. Hell, it's even all right if you cry. I cried. I ain't ashamed of it. Like I cried a lot,
Yeah.
because I completely lost my identity and I had no idea what was going to happen to me. Like, I have no shame in that. And we need to start changing that philosophy to, let's teach these people that when they're off duty or when they're in a safe environment, that's when you can let your guard down and when you can share your emotions. When we can turn it right back on and off. But the problem is we tend to carry that into our personal lives.
Yeah.
And now we're doing the same things with our families and our friends, right? Where we have that emotional armor, we're keeping a certain demeanor about us, we're not sharing anything. We're remaining in that professional kind of environment to like 24/7, and that's unhealthy.
Yes, absolutely. Dan, I just want to say thank you so much because the information, your perspective, your experience that you've shared with us has been honestly just very, I don't even know. I don't even have the words to say it right now, but I'm just so humbled that you're here, that you've come on, and that, you're still fighting. And I think for me, the biggest lesson that I want Sheepdog Nation to take from this is that you went through obviously every officer's worst nightmare. Like, we're just going to call a spade, right? Like,
Right.
you've been down in the dumps to the point where, you said you had some suicidal thoughts. And that's,
Yes.
the truth is I'm going to say this is that's actually not rare. That's probably
Right.
very common in law enforcement, whether we want to admit it or not. Right. And you expressed that you had these fears, because they're going to strip me from my badge, obviously, and they never ended up doing that, which is amazing. And you admitted that you went to therapy and all these things. But, the thing that I just respect so much about you is that you have went through this life altering, event or events, and look at you now. A lot of people, Sheepdog Nation, and pay attention to this because this is what life is all about. We cannot choose the deck of cards that we're given. We don't get to choose that, right? Like we just don't. And Dan was just like everybody else. He lived, for 18 years, he was doing his job, doing his thing. One day, and a situation in seconds has changed his entire life. But the thing is that, Dan, you're still fighting, and you're looking to change the world with your experience, and your resources, and you're bringing resources together, and everything that you're doing. It truly was inspiring. It was inspiring for me right when I saw that video, which is why I reached out to you, because I literally was so moved by that video. And Sheepdog Nation, I'm gonna put the link to the video in the show notes so that you can watch it too, and you can understand how I felt, and you can see the impact that Dan is having. And so here's the message that I just want to say before, Dan, I ask you what you want to leave Sheepdog Nation with. Sheepdog Nation, for me, my message to you is this: you can never tell what's going to happen to you, but you can always do something with what you're given. You can always do something. And look at Dan, and he's a prime example. He's doing something. He's not just sitting around being depressed, fuck my life, what the hell happened, blah, blah, blah. He's not doing that. He took the right steps. He took the steps he needed to take. And now he's changing law enforcement for the better, based on his experiences. So Dan, I just need to say thank you. Thank you for being with us, and thank you for doing you, because it is so needed. I'm really big on the law enforcement suicide as well. So I'm happy to see what you're doing. Can you tell Sheepdog Nation what you want to leave them with?
Yeah. And just real quick, that those videos, that is just a little short clip. And next week we're hoping to release the full clip. So I'll let you know about that, so you can post it up so people can see, because we want that to be shared across the nation. But yeah, I learned early on that I had an option, right? We always have an option. I could either sit in this chair and be angry and mad, depressed, and watch my health dwindle, or I could say, you know what, there's no way the suspect's going to win, and I'm going to do something meaningful in my life. I don't need legs to do what I'm doing. It's I'm not going to let him win this battle, and I do that by taking care of the first responders finding out ways to give them the help they need so they can continue to carry on their job. But there was no way in hell I was going to let the suspect win by having me live in misery in a wheelchair. And there are still good days. There are still bad days, and a lot more good days than bad days. But you know, I'm still fighting right along my other brothers and sisters, and we're going to find ways to help slow this suicide rate down and help give our people the help they need.
Absolutely. So powerful. Dan, how can people find you?
Well, I'm on Facebook. That's about it. I'm not a real big social media guy, but I don't have Twitter or Instagram or any of that stuff. So it's just Facebook at Dan Brite, Brite.
Cool. Awesome. And Sheepdog Nation, I'm going to have that video. I'm going to put in the show notes. I'll let you know how to get in touch with Dan. And Dan, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me.
All right, Sheepdog Nation, we'll see you next time.
And that was another episode of Sheepdog Nation. If you enjoyed this podcast, please go to iTunes and let us know by giving us a rating. If you have questions that you want answered by Autumn in the podcast, submit it by going to the link in the show notes. As always, stay safe and watch your six.